As we found out, I believe yesterday, the city of Louisville, Kentucky, has agreed to pay a $12 million settlement to the family of Breonna Taylor. And this is separate from any criminal case, right? The cops who killed her have not been arrested. They have not been charged. Only one of them has been fired, but it was for unrelated reasons. So they have.
Do we even have their names even been released?
Yeah.
Okay,
okay. I'm pretty sure they have been. I looked at this story yesterday. So we have a $12 million settlement in the civil suit, and we have some milquetoast reforms that are supposed to satisfy everyone, I guess. And I wanted to break down a little bit of what's wrong with this, because I think even to the average layperson, you can see that this is probably not going to do much of anything at all. So first of all, we should note that the $12 million is not coming out of the police budget. It's not coming out of the pockets of the cops who murdered Breonna Taylor in her own home. It's coming from the taxpayers of Louisville. And I think the policymakers who orchestrated this were very careful to sidestep anything that actually defunded the police or reduced their power or their funding. Although I think some of these measures do take steps to sort of co-opt some of these demands and do things that kind of sort of look like they rhyme with it. But that's not enough. So I thought I would go into a little bit of the reforms that they proposed. And, this is even assuming that the cops are actually going to do them, which is, a big assumption. And the sad part is it was probably hard to even get these through in the first place. But okay, let's go through them, shall we? So I have an article in Vox. You want to pull that up, Matt?
Oh, yeah,
it's actually a pretty good article explaining some of these proposed reforms and why they're probably not going to do anything. So good job, Vox. So the first thing, I'm going to quote it, is a plan to create a housing credit program to incentivize officers to live within qualified census tracts or areas identified by the Department of Housing and Urban Development as having a poverty rate of 25% or more, or where 50% of households have incomes below 60% of the area median gross income. So they're going to incentivize cops to live in communities where the rent is already much cheaper than the rent they're currently paying by making it even cheaper for them. I think we can all see that this is not going to cause the cops to move in there, but even if it did, there's very little evidence that moving individual cops into poor neighborhoods positively impacts their treatment of the people in those neighborhoods. Because as we know, the problem is not the individual cops. The problem is systemic. And Vox has a nice little report on this and some data to back it up, because Vox loves data. And also, I just thought of this, considering what Amber Geiger did to Botham Jean in his own home, it might even put people in greater danger to have armed police officers living in the same buildings as them. Okay. Also, officers would be encouraged to volunteer at least 2 hours during the workday per pay period in the community they serve. They're not going to do that. If they do it, it's going to be window dressing. These are things that are designed to improve people's perceptions of the police, right? Not the police's treatment of people, which is the thing that we actually should care about. Okay. 2, social workers are going to supposedly work alongside the police, but they won't replace them. Now, this is a problem because it may sound a little bit like some of the stuff we say when we say defund the police. But when we talk about defunding the police and redistributing the funds, the point is we want social workers to be in contact with people before they have a crisis, right? Stop these incidents before they start, not just after the cops have already been called. Now, this does nothing to shrink the police's contact with the public. It would certainly be good to be able to call a trained mental health professional instead of a cop with a gun if someone is having an episode. I just don't believe that that's what's going to happen here. We also don't know that the funding is going to be substantial, right? Because there are plenty of social workers right now. There are plenty of social workers in prisons, for example, but they're already incredibly overburdened. It's hard to get a hold of them. And I'm guessing the funding for social work here is extremely inadequate. Now, 3, we have some changes to no-knock warrants, right? Because supposedly the cops that killed Breonna Taylor were serving a no-knock warrant, although some people did say that they knocked before they busted down the door and started shooting people, her and her boyfriend. So we have Breonna's law already outlawing no-knock warrants for whatever that may do. We have a few other measures in here. A commanding officer must review and approve all search warrants before an officer seeks judicial approval for the warrant in an attempt to calculate and assess risk. The department plans to overhaul the process and the chain of command for simultaneous search warrants. Oh, and the department now requires that an EMS or paramedics be at the scene where force or entry warrants are used, right? So if the cops shoot you 10 times in the back, they'll say, oh, well, at least we have a paramedic to try to bring you back to life, which, probably isn't going to work in most of these cases. And it's just like an ass backwards way of dealing with police violence and murders. So we have here a bunch of reforms that there is no indication the cops are going to follow. If they do, it's not going to do anything, even as reported by the liberals at Vox. And number 4, sorry, I missed one. We have, quote, to foster accountability, LMPD will implement the police integrity software, IAPRO, which will track use of force incidents, citizen complaints, and investigations, among other events. Right. So now we're gonna track police violence a little bit better, because that's clear. Is this obvious to everyone else as it is to me? Like, that's not how you stop it. We have body cams. We have all this stuff. They haven't done shit. Okay. The only thing that's going to reduce police violence is to defund the police, reduce their contact with the public, grow other social services to stop the root causes of interpersonal harm, and crowd out this system which exists solely to keep people oppressed and to enforce capitalist property relations and white supremacy.
When you mentioned the software thing at first, before you completed that sentence, for a second, I thought they were going to float installing a new operating system in cops themselves. Like it was a flawed software, and they've upgraded the OS or something like that.
God. Yeah, because
it is.
Putting robots in cop uniforms has never gone wrong for anyone.
Right, of course. It's. Again, I want to stress on there's been so many situations where someone with mental health issues have been killed by a police officer when the situation shouldn't even, the police nor the person going through the episode shouldn't have even been put in that situation. I mean, these reforms are certainly not going to solve anything.
Yeah.
This is what I'm thinking of, actually, when you were saying these reforms. I was thinking about this. There was a recent case, I think it was just a few days ago, where a man approached the police. Police were called to a house, and a man with a knife approached the officer, and the officer shot and killed him. Now, it later came out that the family didn't even call the police. They called a different line for help for specifically people with mental health issues and explained the situation. And someone still got the cops to go there. It's just the whole system and how people think is just wrong. Mm-hmm. I don't know what to. I'm not the professional here to come up with the solutions, but I see what the problems are, and the people who are the professionals here need to come to figure out what they're going to do about this, because it's not working.
Mm-hmm. And I should add, right? I do not agree that jailing killer cops is going to act as a deterrent in any way to police violence, but counterposed against obviously milquetoast, insufficient, do nothing reforms like this one, like all of these, I can see why people would find that preferable in terms of the ideas that have been floated. However, I don't think that quote unquote jailing killer cops is ultimately the answer either. It's just probably not going to happen. 538, the wonks are like really on the ball today. 538 actually has a pretty good article explaining why cops are so rarely charged, even in incidents of egregious murder and misconduct, and why that's probably not going to change. They have like some experts talking about it. But even if that did happen, this problem is systemic, right? It's not just a few bad apples, and we don't want to reinforce the idea that it is, right? This is an oppressive system. This is a system-wide problem. And I think when people say justice for Breonna, they want to jail these cops, I think that's because this is the kind of justice that we have most commonly been taught to believe exists in society. But I think if you gave most people, most families of victims of police murder the choice between getting revenge on the specific cops who killed their loved ones and making changes that make sure that nobody else ever has to go through this, I feel like most people would choose the latter. Is that crazy? Like, I really believe that this message of disarm, defund, and abolish, there's so much good data behind it. I think the more that it spreads, and the more it is becoming a very widespread demand, at least as much as jailing killer cops. I think that that's really going to be the more fruitful path to go down. You know, on the other hand, I'm not going to shed any tears if any of these cops do go to jail, but like judging from, we don't really have good data on how jailing killer cops affects police violence because it simply doesn't happen. But if you look at the stats for other crimes, certainly the incidence of being charged and sent to jail does not act as a deterrent for any other crime. So I'm not sure why it would here.
I do think the police are a little bit more aware that they're surely getting away with it. Whereas,
yeah, I mean,
you know, I think it is. I mean, again, you can advocate that it's not what's the best way to deal with it. But I would certainly say that seeing a few cops finally get put in jail for just flagrantly killing people who are unarmed and or not putting them in a situation where they need to draw fire on them, I do think there will be an effect. I don't think it's the same as other crimes, to be quite honest with you.
I want to also just say, like, if you look at the Sergeant Benevolence Association Twitter account as indicative of the problem we have just or rotten to the core with police in this country, I think I agree with Jamie. Like, this is the revolution versus reform dichotomy, like revolution where you have a wholesale change in personnel, structure, and goals. Like, I don't trust any of these cops. Like, they like the amount of mendacity, like we've all been prepared. Like, cops are liars is something like we've known. I mean, if anyone's been paying attention to the last 5 years, but I think this year particularly, the amount of mendacity I've seen, the amount of lies from police departments, just blatant lying. Like, this is a institution that does not have public trust and cannot win it back, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. I mean, you could just see by, it's been so flagrantly done, these cops getting away with what they're doing and doing what they're doing, that, I mean, there's a reason why when these Black Lives Matter protests first broke out this year, end of May, early June, that the polling that took place showed that for the first time, the majority of Americans were viewed BLM in a positive way, because it's become so clear to even the most, the most turned out people who don't pay attention to the political dialogue and discourse of every day. But it's just so in your face now that you know it's happening, and you can no longer deny it or pretend that it's not an issue, or pretend that it's just a few bad apples. Again, if you live in reality, but there's a number of people who don't.
Yeah. That's the thing, is like polling on that is discouraging a little bit, because that spike definitely happened right after the burning of the precinct in Minneapolis. Approval of Black Lives Matter skyrocketed in the immediate aftermath of that, and then over the course of time it starts whittling down again because the media keeps stressing things like property damage. Let's see if I can find that. I kind of stopped looking. It's easy. It's a lot easier to be a producer when you're not also talking on mic. But
oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, I could vamp for a second and mention one more thing, which is, putting those killer cops in jail might keep those specific cops from killing people for the specific amount of time that they're in jail, which is probably not going to happen in the first place because the system is not designed to put police in jail. But if it ever were to happen, if they weren't in a white power gang before, they definitely will be when they come out, and they're probably going to be even more dangerous.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think there's many times of cop murders, you have the one who's like a specific racist who has multiple different incidents in his past that are going to come up, and then you have the one who might not have those long history of thuggish incidents, but they're put in a position by their job and they end up murdering someone anyway, and then the blue line covers for them too. I found that poll in here. Here's Derek Thompson.
And we absolutely have to break the power of police unions too, because they play a major role in making sure that no cops are ever held accountable.
Yeah, here's the support. So it basically just you did get a rise in opposed just keep going up. This is, I think, the impact of media, just super discouraging spike in support, and then to back down. There's more people that support it, but there's also more people that don't support it, and fewer people haven't made their mind up.
Well, I think that's it's still up overwhelmingly from how it was in previous years. But I think that's a natural reaction for people to agree when it first kicks off. And then, of course, you're going to have the people who a couple months down the line, in their heart, they still agree. But this whole thing's gone on for too long. I just want peace right now. There's always going to be those people, and that's surely a number of Democrats feel that way. The people who just want to go back to brunch when Donald Trump is out of office. Those people exist. So I don't think the polling shows that it's all, in my opinion, this is obviously an opinion, has dropped that much. I still think it's much different than how it previously was in a positive way in terms of how people view Black Lives Matter.
I 100% agree. I definitely wouldn't want to take back, I take back some of the horrible incidents that have happened, but in terms of I do think returning back to the no heat without light, I think the longer the stuff is exposed, I think people's impressions will be. I just think we're fighting against this media apparatus that is basically going to poison people's minds against it the entire way.
Right. But I also feel like, once you hit your mark of 6 months is too much or something like that, then pretty much you've gotten everyone who isn't going to stick around off already. There's no one who's going to say, I'm positive until about a year. People have short attention spans. They want this, if I feel like we're at the level point and it's only going to be spiked up.
Yeah. I hope so. The media definitely needs to do better in the way they cover this, but they're probably never going to. And they are our enemies, and we can't rely on them to be any kind of. I even hate the word ally. I feel like it's been so poisoned by the libs, but we can't rely on them to be allies or accomplices or help in any way in this fight. But, we got our work cut out for us, obviously. But I don't know. I've been really inspired by even stuff like the Bernie Sanders campaign, taking something like Medicare for All from this quote unquote fringe demand to something that every Democratic candidate running is forced to comment on. He moved the window on that with the help of everyone else, everyone supporting him, everyone who'd been calling for it for years and years. And I really think that this is the moment that we can push the window in the same way on defund and eventually abolish as a slogan. And not just a slogan, a thing that will un-F the world.
All right, let me